Rain hammered the black sedan's windshield as Caleb watched her walk out of his building for the third time that week. 2 heavy canvas bags pulled her shoulders down, same bags she hadn't carried in that morning. His driver reached for the ignition, but Caleb raised one hand. Not yet. The woman who cleaned his penthouse moved through the downpour like she didn't feel it. 26 years old, dark skin glistening under the streetlights, and she carried those bags like they weighed nothing. Or like whatever was inside mattered more than the pain. Caleb had built an empire on reading people. Knowing when someone lied, when they stole, when they hid something worth finding. For 3 weeks, those bags appeared every Tuesday and Thursday night. She'd arrive at 6 in the morning with her cleaning supplies and a small purse. She'd leave at 7 in the evening with 2 stuffed canvas bags that hadn't existed before. His accountant ran the numbers twice. Nothing missing from the safe. His lieutenant checked the wine collection, the art, the imported cigars from his office humidor. Everything accounted for. But those bags kept appearing, and questions without answers made Caleb's jaw tighten. The sedan's leather creaked as he leaned forward. Follow her. Keep distance. His driver, Tommy, had been with him for 12 years. Never questioned, never hesitated. The engine purred to life as the woman in the yellow raincoat turned down Fifth Avenue. Caleb pulled his phone from his coat pocket and opened the building's security footage from that morning. There she was at 6:04 a.m., walking through the lobby with her small purse and a thermos. No bags. Tommy kept 3 cars between them as she boarded the southbound bus on Madison. Caleb hadn't been south of 34th Street in 5 years. His business kept him in boardrooms and private clubs where men spoke in code and deals closed with handshakes that meant more than contracts. The neighborhoods blurring past his window now, he owned them. Collected from them. Never visited them. The bus stopped at 58th Street. She got off, shifted both bags to one shoulder, and walked east. Caleb's phone buzzed. His brother's name lit up the screen. He declined the call. Tonight was about one question: what was she hiding? She turned down an alley behind a church with boarded windows and graffiti covering the brick. Tommy slowed the sedan. Want me to go with you? Caleb shook his head and stepped out into the rain. His shoes, Italian leather that cost more than most people's monthly rent, hit the wet pavement. He waited until she disappeared around the corner, then followed. The alley smelled like garbage and wet cardboard. Broken glass crunched under his feet. A metal door stood at the end, light seeping through the cracks. He heard voices inside, laughter, the clatter of dishes. Caleb moved closer, pressed his back against the brick wall, and looked through the narrow window. His maid stood at a long table serving soup from a massive pot. Her yellow raincoat hung on a hook behind her, and she wore a faded Howard University sweatshirt with the sleeves pushed up. 30, maybe 40 people sat at folding tables eating from paper bowls. Kids in thin jackets. Old men with shopping carts parked by the door. Women with tired eyes and babies on their hips. She moved between them like she knew every face. Poured soup, handed out bread wrapped in foil, touched shoulders, smiled in a way Caleb had never seen. Not the polite, careful smile she gave him when she said "Good morning, Mr. Reed." This smile reached her eyes. If you're enjoying this story, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on more. A teenage boy approached the table. She handed him 2 pieces of cornbread before he asked. "You doing okay, Brandon? Your mom find work yet?" The boy shook his head. "She's trying. Tell her to come see me Thursday. I know someone." Caleb's chest went tight. The bags weren't full of stolen goods. They were full of food she'd bought with her own money. Food for people who had nothing. People his business had probably pushed out of their apartments when his company bought buildings and tripled the rent. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Amara, where does the food come from?" She knelt down to the girl's level, brushed a braid out of her face. "I make it with love, sweetheart. So you grow up strong." Caleb stepped back from the window. His hand found the brick wall behind him, cold and rough through his shirt. For 3 weeks, he'd been sure she was stealing from him. 3 weeks of suspicion, of watching her, of running inventory like she was a criminal. She could have asked him for money. Could have told him what she was doing. But she didn't, and that truth hit harder than any punch he'd ever taken. After 2 years of cleaning his home, making his coffee, organizing his life, she decided something about him. She didn't trust him with her mercy. The rain soaked through his coat. Caleb walked back to the sedan, climbed in, and told Tommy to wait. 2 hours passed. People trickled out of the church basement, called thank you through the door, disappeared into the night. When she finally emerged, both bags empty and folded under her arm, Caleb rolled down the window. "Amara." She turned. No surprise crossed her face, just something that looked like disappointment. She walked to the car, opened the back door, and slid in without a word. Tommy pulled into traffic. Silence filled the sedan except for the rain and the swish of wipers. Caleb wanted to explain, to apologize, to ask her why she never said anything. But his throat closed around the words. "How long?" His voice came out rough. Amara stared out the window at the city lights reflecting off wet streets. "4 years. Since my sister died." He'd sent flowers to that funeral. White lilies delivered to the address she'd given his assistant. Never asked how her sister died. Never asked if she needed time off. Just sent flowers and moved on. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at him then, and her eyes held something he couldn't name. "What would you have done? Made it about you? Turned those people into a tax write-off?" The words cut clean through. "I wanted them to stay human. Not your charity case." Tommy turned onto the street where Amara lived, a neighborhood Caleb's company had bought and sold 3 times in the past decade. Small houses with chain-link fences and cars that had seen better years. She pointed to a brick house with a porch light on. "Here." Caleb got out with her, walked her to the door. She unlocked it, and he saw inside before she could close it. A purple couch with a blanket draped over the back. A shelf with books and a framed photo. In the photo, a woman in military uniform stood at attention. The nameplate read Sergeant Amara Johnson, and a bronze star hung beside it. The woman who made his coffee every morning had saved lives in a war zone. Had earned one of the military's highest honors. And he'd never asked her a single question about who she was. She followed his gaze. "My dad wanted me to frame it. Said I should be proud." "You should be." Amara shrugged. "Pride doesn't feed people." She stepped inside and closed the door. Caleb stood on her porch in the rain, staring at that purple curtain in the window, and felt something crack open in his chest. Not guilt exactly. Something bigger. The realization that he'd been walking through life with his eyes closed. Tommy drove him home in silence. The penthouse elevator rose 70 floors, and Caleb walked into a space that suddenly felt too big, too cold, too empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed him the city stretched out below, every light a person he'd never met, never thought about, never cared if they had a home. He thought about Amara at 7 years old, losing her mother. He'd read her employment file when he hired her. Single-parent household. Raised by father. Honorably discharged veteran. College degree in social work. The file sat in his office, pages of information he'd never processed beyond the background check. He remembered being 9, sitting at his own mother's funeral in a suit that scratched his neck. His father had walked out 6 months before. Cancer took his mother 3 months after that. His uncle raised him, taught him the business, taught him that sentiment was weakness and mercy was for people who couldn't afford to be strong. His uncle had built the family's power by being ruthless. Caleb had expanded it by being smart. Legitimate businesses fronting for operations the FBI had been trying to prove for 20 years. Real estate development that looked clean on paper but destroyed communities in practice. He'd convinced himself it was just business, just the way the world worked. But Amara's face in that basement, the way she'd smiled at those people, the way she'd knelt down to talk to that little girl, that wasn't business. That was something else. Something he'd forgotten existed. Morning light broke over the city. Caleb stood at his window, still in yesterday's wet clothes, and pulled out his phone. He called his lawyer. "I need Amara Johnson's insurance upgraded. Full coverage. No copays, no limits. Effective immediately. Sir, it's 6 in the morning. I don't care what time it is. Get it done." He hung up and called his doctor's office when they opened at 8. Made Amara an appointment for a full physical, blood work, everything they offered. When she arrived at the penthouse at her usual time, he was waiting. She set her bag down in the entryway, pulled out her cleaning supplies. "Good morning, Mr. Reed." "Amara. I made you a doctor's appointment. Tomorrow at 10. Her hands stopped moving. "I don't need." "Yes, you do. Mr. Reed, I appreciate the thought, but it's not a thought. It's happening. I upgraded your insurance. Full coverage." Something shifted in her expression. Not gratitude. Something harder, sharper. "Why now?" "What? Why now, Mr. Reed? I've worked for you for 2 years. Suddenly you care about my health?" The question hung between them like smoke. "Because I didn't know." "You didn't ask." She picked up her supplies and walked past him toward the kitchen. The truth of her words settled in his stomach like stones. He hadn't asked. Hadn't wondered. Hadn't cared. Over the next week, Caleb found himself working from home more often. His brother called 3 times asking why he wasn't at the warehouse, why he'd missed the meeting with their distributor, why he seemed distracted. Caleb gave vague answers and hung up. He watched Amara move through his penthouse with the same quiet efficiency she'd always had. But now he noticed things. The way she gripped the counter when she thought he wasn't looking. The way she paused at the top of the stairs to catch her breath. The way her hands shook slightly when she poured his coffee. Wednesday evening, he found her packing containers in the kitchen. Soup, bread, cut vegetables sealed in plastic bags. "You're going tonight?" She didn't look up. "I go every week. Let me help." "You helped last week. I want to help again." She stopped, set down a container, turned to face him. "Mr. Reed, I don't know what you're trying to do, but this sudden interest in my life doesn't change anything." "What do you mean?" Her eyes met his, clear and unflinching. "I've been invisible to you for 2 years. You didn't wonder where I lived, what I needed, if I was okay. And I made peace with that. I found my purpose outside of this place." Each word landed with weight. "But now you follow me. Show up at the church. Upgrade my insurance. Make doctor's appointments. And I'm supposed to be grateful? I'm trying to make things right." "You can't." Her voice cracked slightly. "You can't undo 2 years, Mr. Reed. You can't erase the fact that you saw me every day and never once thought to ask if I was all right." Caleb felt something break in his chest. The same thing that cracked on her porch, splitting wider now. "I raised myself after my mom died." Amara continued, her voice steady but quiet. "Worked 3 jobs to pay for college. Joined the military because it was the only way to afford grad school. Came home to a sister with diabetes who couldn't afford insulin." Tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. "Watched her die at 28 because the cost of staying alive was more than we could pay. And you know what I learned? Caleb couldn't speak. That people like you will never see people like me until it's convenient. Until it makes you feel better about yourself. She picked up the containers and her canvas bags. I need to get to the church. Let me drive you. No. Amara. No, Mr. Reed. She looked at him one more time. You want to help? Really help? Stop trying to fix me. Stop trying to fix your guilt. And start looking at what you've actually built. She walked out. Caleb stood in his kitchen, surrounded by marble countertops and appliances that cost more than most people's cars, and felt the walls close in. He walked to the windows, looked out at his city. Every building with his family's name carved into steel. Every block reshaped by his decisions. And for the first time, he saw what Amara saw. Not progress. Not development. Destruction dressed up in glass and chrome. He pulled out his laptop, opened the files for the Riverside project. The development his company just closed. 600 families displaced. He'd signed the papers 3 months ago without reading the impact reports. Just looked at the profit margins and the timeline. Now he read every page. Family profiles. Income levels. How long they'd lived there. Where they'd go when his company demolished their homes. Robert Grant. Age 68. Lived in the same apartment for 42 years. Veteran. Disabled. The buyout Caleb's company offered wouldn't cover 4 months' rent anywhere else in the city. Lisa Hammond. Single mother of 4. Worked 2 jobs, one as a nurse's aide, one cleaning offices at night. Losing her apartment meant pulling her kids out of their school, moving an hour outside the city, adding 3 more hours to her commute. Page after page. Name after name. 2,000 people. Real lives. Real loss. And Caleb had signed it all away without thinking twice. His phone rang at 6 in the morning 3 days later. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Reed, this is Dr. Patel from Mercy Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for Amara Johnson. His stomach dropped. Is she okay? She collapsed during her appointment yesterday. We admitted her for observation. She's stable now. Caleb was in the car before the doctor finished talking. Tommy drove through early morning traffic while Caleb gripped his phone hard enough to crack the screen. The hospital's fluorescent lights made everything look too bright, too clean. A nurse directed him to the 4th floor. He found Amara in a private room, asleep, and 4 in her arm and monitors beeping softly beside the bed. Caleb sank into the chair next to her and put his head in his hands. Dr. Patel came in 20 minutes later. Young woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She sat down across from him. Mr. Reed, Amara has advanced diabetes. Her kidneys are showing early damage. Her blood pressure is dangerously high. She's severely anemic. The words hit like bullets. All of these conditions are treatable, but they've gone unmanaged for years. She told me she hasn't seen a doctor in over 3 years. Caleb closed his eyes. I know. Her previous insurance wouldn't have covered most of this. Out of pocket, we're talking $400, maybe $500 a month in medication and specialist visits alone. She was choosing between her health and feeding people who had nothing. Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment. She's remarkable. But Mr. Reed, she can't keep living like this. Her body won't take it. The doctor left. Caleb sat beside Amara's bed and watched her breathe. Her face looked softer in sleep, younger, and he could see the girl who'd joined the military at 19. The woman who'd buried her sister at 24. The person who'd been carrying the world on her shoulders while he'd been too blind to notice. She stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, found him sitting there. Mr. Reed. I'm here. She looked at the 4, the monitors. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Stop. His voice broke. Stop apologizing. She went quiet. Caleb leaned forward, his throat tight. Your middle name is Lynn. I looked it up last night. Amara Lynn Johnson. Born in 1999 in Baltimore. You joined the army at 19. Served 4 years. Came home and finished your degree while working full-time. Tears filled her eyes. You had a sister named Crystal. She died at 28 from diabetes complications because she couldn't afford insulin. And for 4 years, you've been feeding strangers with money you should have spent on yourself because no one else would. His voice cracked. I gave you the cheapest insurance I could find. Paid you fairly but never thought about what fair actually meant. Never asked if you could afford your medicine, your rent, your life. He put his head in his hands. I've spent 2 years taking your time, your work, your presence. And I never gave you anything that mattered. You gave me a job, Amara said softly. A purpose. I gave you scraps. Caleb looked up at her. And you turned them into grace. You turned my indifference into love for people I was too blind to see. Tears ran down her face. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. Because I need to change. Not just how I treat you. How I treat everyone. Amara reached out, took his hand. Her fingers were thin, weak, but her grip was firm. Caleb. His name. His actual name. For the first time in 2 years. I forgave you a long time ago. Why? Because holding anger would have poisoned me. And I had too many people counting on me to let that happen. She squeezed his hand. But forgiveness doesn't mean things stay the same. It means you have a chance to do better. I will. I promise. Then start with this. She looked at him with clear eyes. Stop trying to save me. I don't need saving. I need a partner. Someone who sees what I see. The people at the church. The people everywhere. The ones your buildings push out. The ones your deals forget. The ones who work for you but can't afford to live near you. Her words landed like stones. I've watched you build an empire, Caleb. And it's impressive. But empires built on other people's loss don't stand forever. They crumble. And when they do, all you're left with is money and an empty house. The truth of it settled in his bones. So if you want to change, change what you're building. Not just for me. For everyone. Caleb sat there, holding her hand, feeling 2 years of blindness pressing down on him. But also feeling something else. Hope. Not the kind that erased the past. The kind that made the future possible. Okay. Amara closed her eyes, exhausted but peaceful. Caleb stayed beside her bed until she fell asleep, then pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. The Riverside Project. I want every family we're displacing contacted personally. I want names, stories, where they're going, what they need. Caleb, this will take months. Then we take months. Silence on the other end. And I want a meeting with the family. Next week. I'm restructuring how we develop. Restructuring how? He looked at Amara sleeping, her face soft and at peace. We're going to build with people. Not on top of them. Amara came home 5 days later. Caleb had arranged everything. A nurse to check on her daily. Medications delivered. A schedule of follow-up appointments. But she didn't come back to work. For the first time in 2 years, his penthouse felt empty without her. Thursday came. 7 o'clock. Caleb drove to the church alone. When he walked into the basement, a young man setting up tables looked up, surprised. Where's Miss Amara? She's recovering. Doctor's orders. The man's face tightened. Is she okay? She will be. Caleb picked up a stack of chairs and started helping. The man watched him for a moment, then nodded. People arrived. Caleb served soup, handed out bread, tried to remember names like Amara did. An older man came through the line, thin, gray beard, leaning on a cane. Caleb recognized him from the development reports he'd been reading every night. Robert Grant. Evening. Caleb filled his bowl. The man nodded, took his soup to a corner table, sat down slowly. Caleb's hands went cold. This was him. 42 years in the same apartment. Displaced by Reed Development. Offered a buyout that wouldn't cover 3 months' rent. Caleb set down the ladle and walked over. May I sit? Robert looked up, studied him. Free country. Caleb sat. His throat felt tight. I'm Caleb Reed. The man's expression didn't change. He kept eating his soup. I know who you are. You bought my building 2 years ago. Said you were going to renovate. Make it better. He took another spoonful. And you did. New windows, fresh paint, looked real nice. Then you raised the rent from $900 a month to $2,800. Gave us 60 days to leave or sign a lease we couldn't afford. Caleb couldn't breathe. I lived there 42 years. Raised my kids in that apartment. Watched my wife die in that apartment. Every morning I sat by the window and watched the sun come up over the river. He looked at Caleb. Now I sleep in a shelter. Or here when they'll let me. Because the buyout you gave me, $15,000 for 42 years, ran out in 7 months. I'm sorry, Caleb whispered. Robert set down his spoon. You sorry or you just feel bad now that you got a face to the name? Both. The old man studied him. You know what the worst part is? It wasn't even personal to you. You probably signed that deal without thinking twice. Just another building. You're right. I know I'm right. Robert leaned back. I was somebody before your company came. Had a home. Had dignity. Now I'm just another old man with a cane eating free soup in a church basement. Caleb put his head in his hands. Mr. Grant, I can't undo what I did, but I can. Can what? Give me my home back. Give me my 42 years back. Give me back the mornings I watched the sun and felt like I belonged somewhere. The basement had gone quiet. People were watching. You can't fix this with money. Robert's voice rose. You can write me a check right now and it won't change the fact that you looked at my life and decided it was worth less than your profit margin. You're right. Caleb looked at this man who'd lost everything because of a signature on a contract. I can't fix it. But I can stop doing it. I can change how we build. Make sure no one else loses their home the way you did. Robert's eyes narrowed. Words are cheap, Mr. Reed. I know. So let me prove it. Come work with me. Help me understand what I've been too blind to see. Tell me how to build without destroying. The young man from earlier stepped forward. You serious? Yes. You're going to let a homeless man tell you how to run your company? He's not homeless. Caleb's voice was firm. He's a man I made homeless. And he knows more about what this community needs than I ever will. The basement went silent. Robert picked up his soup, took a slow sip, set it down. I'll think about it. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no. Caleb nodded, stood, walked back to the kitchen. His hands were shaking. The young man came over, stood beside him. That took guts. That was the truth. Yeah, but most people with power don't tell the truth. They make excuses. I'm done making excuses. The man nodded slowly. Then maybe you're actually serious about this. They finished serving in silence. When everyone left, Caleb sat alone in the empty basement. The smell of soup. The stacked chairs. The quiet. He thought about Robert. 42 years gone because he'd signed papers without reading them. He pulled out his phone, called his assistant. I need the full list of every property Reed Development has acquired in the last 10 years. Displacement records. Every family, every person. Names. Sir, that's thousands of files. I don't care how many. I need to see them. All of them. He hung up and made a promise to the empty room. To Robert. To Amara. To every person his family's business had forgotten. He would see them. Every single one. And he would do better. Not because it was profitable. Because it was right. 3 months later, Caleb stood in front of the city council. Same room where he'd presented the Riverside project. Same people who'd approved his $300 million development without question. But everything else was different. I'm here to present a revised proposal. Riverside Commons. A community-centered development built with residents, not on top of them. He clicked to the first slide. Instead of profit projections, faces filled the screen. Names. Stories. This is Robert Grant. 70 years old. Displaced by my company 2 years ago. He's now our community advisory director, helping us redesign this project from the ground up. Robert sat in the front row. Nodded once. This is Lisa Hammond. Single mother of 4. We displaced her family 18 months ago. She's now our family services coordinator, making sure no family loses their home without real support. Lisa sat next to Robert. Her eyes were wet but her chin was high. The new Riverside Commons will be 40% affordable housing, 30% workforce housing, 30% market rate. Every displaced family has been offered first right to return. Not as tenants. As partial owners. Council members leaned forward. We're hiring locally. Training programs for construction jobs. Loans for small businesses. A community center with free programs run by the people who live there. He paused. This project will take longer. Cost more upfront. Our profit margins will be smaller. But we'll be building something that lasts. Something that serves. One council member raised her hand. Mr. Reed, this is a significant departure from your previous model. Yes, ma'am. What changed? Caleb looked at Amara sitting quietly in the back row. I did. The vote was unanimous. When Caleb walked out, Robert was waiting. You did good in there. We did good. Robert smiled for the first time Caleb had seen. Yeah. We did. 6 months later, ground broke on Riverside Commons. No politicians. No champagne. Just people. Families coming home. Kids playing in the dirt. Elderly residents planting seeds in what would become community gardens. Robert walked the property with Caleb, pointing to where his old apartment had been. My place was right there. Sun came through that window every morning. We'll make sure you get that same view. I promise. Robert looked at him. You know what? I believe you. Lisa's 4 kids ran past, laughing. She called after them, then turned to Caleb. Thank you for giving us a chance to come back. You're not coming back as guests. This is your home. She hugged him. Caleb, who'd spent 32 years avoiding connection, hugged her back. As the sun set, Amara stood beside him. This is good work. It's a start. It's more than a start. It's a transformation. Caleb looked at the families around them. Talking, laughing, planning, hoping. For the first time in his life, he understood what he'd been chasing. Not power. Not wealth. Not buildings with his family's name carved in steel. Connection. Purpose. Grace. I wish I'd learned this years ago. Amara took his hand. You learned it when you were ready. That's all that matters. They stood together as the sky turned gold, then pink, then deep blue. And Caleb felt something new. Peace. Not because everything was fixed. Because he was finally building something worth building. Not monuments to himself. Homes for people who deserved them. 18 months later, Riverside Commons opened with a block party. Tables stretched down the street. Music played from speakers someone had set up. Kids ran between the buildings, new buildings with big windows and front porches where people could sit and watch the sun rise. Caleb stood at the edge watching. The young man from the church, whose name was Trevor, walked over with a woman. Mr. Reed, this is my fiancée, Angela. Caleb shook her hand. Congratulations. Trevor told me what you did. Giving him a chance when no one else would. He gave me a chance. Taught me how to see. Robert sat on a bench in front of his new apartment. Same view he'd had 42 years ago. He waved. Caleb waved back. Lisa's kids played basketball on the new court. She stood watching, arms folded, peace on her face. When she saw Caleb, she mouthed thank you. Amara walked up beside him. She looked stronger now, healthier. Her dark hair caught the afternoon light. You did it. We did it. She smiled. Yes. We did. They stood together watching the community celebrate. People who'd been scattered were home. Families who'd been broken were whole. And in the center of it all was something Caleb had never built before. Belonging. I was thinking about that night I followed you. When I expected to find a thief. Amara looked at him. I was so sure you were taking something from me. But the truth is, you'd been giving me everything. And I just couldn't see it. His voice cracked. You saw me when I was blind. Stayed when I was wrong. And when I finally opened my eyes, you didn't walk away. You helped me become someone worth being. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I'll ever be the man you believed I could be, but I'm trying. Every day. Because of you. She took his hand. Caleb, you already are. A little girl ran up. The same one from the church basement who'd asked where the food came from. She was taller now, smiling. Miss Amara, come see our new apartment. We have 3 bedrooms and a kitchen with windows. Amara laughed. I'll be right there, sweetheart. The girl ran off. Caleb looked at Amara. You know what I realized? I spent 32 years building things I could see from 70 floors up. Towers, skylines, monuments. He gestured to the families around them. But this, people with homes, kids with hope, communities with purpose, you can't see this from up there. You can only see it when you come down. When you get close enough to look people in the eye. Amara squeezed his hand. And now you see. Now I see. The sun was setting. Gold light spilled across the new buildings, the community garden, the playground where children laughed. Amara started walking toward the little girl's family, then stopped and turned back. Caleb. Yeah. Welcome home. She walked away, and Caleb stood there feeling the weight of those 2 words. Welcome home. He'd spent his whole life in penthouses and boardrooms, surrounded by money and power. But he'd never been home. Not until now. Not until he learned that home wasn't a place you owned. It was a place where you belonged. Where people knew your name. Where your presence mattered not because of what you had, but because of who you were. Caleb walked into the crowd. Shook hands. Hugged children. Listened to stories. And somewhere in the middle of it all, surrounded by people he'd once ignored in a neighborhood he'd almost destroyed, he finally understood what his life was for. Not to build higher. To lift others up. Not to take more. To give everything. Not to be seen. To see. He looked up at the sky, the same sky that covered his penthouse 70 floors up. But from down here it looked different. Closer. Warmer. Like grace bending low enough to touch broken places. And Caleb whispered something he'd never said before. Thank you. For Amara. For second chances. For eyes that finally see. The prayer was simple, honest, real. Just like the life he was learning to live. A life where wealth wasn't measured in buildings but in people who felt seen. Where success wasn't counted in profits but in families who had homes. Where legacy wasn't carved in steel but written in the hearts of those who'd been loved when the world forgot them. Caleb had spent 32 years building an empire. Now, finally, he was building something that mattered. A community. A family. A home. And as stars came out over Riverside Commons and music filled the air and children danced in streets that used to be forgotten, Caleb knew this was what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not power. Love. Not monuments. People. Not his name on a building. But his heart in a place that would remember him long after the towers fell. This was grace. This was home. This was enough. If this story made you feel something, if it opened your eyes to people you walk past every day, don't just watch and forget. Hit subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere in your city, there's an Amara feeding people the world ignores. There's a Robert losing his home to someone's profit margin. There's a Lisa working 2 jobs and still falling behind. And maybe, just maybe, you're a Caleb who hasn't opened his eyes yet. But you can. Starting today. Starting now. Because the people you don't see are still there. Still waiting. Still hoping someone will finally look close enough to care.